All right, guys. So earlier today on Breaking Points, we had on a very interesting guest. His name is Bilal Hamoud, and he's the executive director for the Arab American Chamber of Commerce. And he, along with several other Arab American organizations, recently had a meeting with Joe Biden's Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, during which Antony Blinken made what is arguably the most unhinged and insane threat that I have seen from a U.S. official in a very long time. Okay, so we're going to watch this clip here, and then I'm going to show you guys some of the demands that were being made by these Arab American groups during this meeting with Antony Blinken. So let's go ahead and hear what Bilal has to say in terms of the prospects of the United States ever allowing for a Palestinian state.
And so when the topic of statehood got brought up, we had asked for both a free and independent Palestine, a statehood, and a seat at the UN Security Council table. And the response was disappointing because it made the comparison to, well, first and foremost, that a vote for a Palestinian statehood from the US would lead to the defunding of the UN from the US being its primary funder. But then the example brought up was that it would be within the right of the UN to then cut programs like the World Food Program. And so the fact that the comparison was made that the world would have to go hungry just like the Gazans are, and the fact that it's US policy to starve the world if Palestinians have a free state, regardless of if that's the law or not, is indicative of something severely wrong.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Yeah, so Antony Blinken said, we have to oppose Palestinian statehood or else the World Food Program budget will be cut and people will starve around the world. Like, that's the Secretary of State's assessment that he's making to you guys in this meeting?
The example was given that if the UN had to cut its funding, it would have to cut programs like the World Food Program. And that was the example shared, followed by the explanation that then the world would have to starve as the Gazans are. And so that is not the comparison you make to make an argument for why Palestinians should not have a free state.
Okay, so let's try to unpack the insanity of what he just revealed, okay? He just revealed that the US Secretary of State is essentially saying if the United States allows for a vote at the United Nations to officially recognize a Palestinian state, then the United States would have no choice in the matter, but to defund the United Nations, which would then lead to the United Nations defunding, like, the World Food Program, for example. Therefore, countless thousands of people around the world would have to starve to death. So, to condense it even more, this is the Secretary of State of the United States of America threatening to starve the world if a Palestinian state is established and recognized. That's what we just heard. Now, this isn't even the first time that I've heard similar statements to this or like this, but it is completely unhinged, right? Not just to say this, and for this to even be a part of US law and practice and standards, but it's also especially insane to say this kind of thing when you're in the middle of a meeting with Arab American leaders who you are presumably meeting with because you know that Joe Biden is struggling with Arab Americans in the 2024 polls, and so he's trying to win some of them back. And your explanation for why a Palestinian state cannot be established right now is because then, oops, we'd have to starve the world. That's what we're getting right now from the Biden administration. I mean, I would say it's genuinely unbelievable, but it's really not. It's really not. Now, in terms of what these organizations were demanding from the Biden administration, here from the press release from the Arab American Institute, they say, with regard to the situation in Gaza, at a minimum, the administration must make clear, number one, an immediate ceasefire. Number two, the return of all hostages and prisoners held without charges. They're talking about Palestinians by the thousands who have been arrested, rounded up, and held indefinitely in what's referred to as administrative detention in Israel without any charges. Number three, the complete withdrawal of Israeli forces from all of Gaza. And number four, the unimpeded humanitarian assistance to reach the Palestinian population, including through UNRWA. The administration also must cease arms shipments to Israel and initiate the rebuilding of the devastated Palestinian communities. So all of this is entirely reasonable and honestly is the bare minimum of what needs to happen right now. And so instead of getting any of these things addressed, in fact, we're doing the exact opposite of basically all of these demands. But with these demands on the table, instead we get, sorry, but we're going to starve the world if you try to establish a Palestinian state. This is what we're getting from the Biden administration right now. Now, I got a couple more updates here for you guys. Somehow I missed this yesterday when I was doing my rundown on the Israeli officials and U.S. politicians freaking out in the aftermath of the ICC, the International Criminal Court, officially issuing that application to try to get arrest warrants for both Benjamin Netanyahu as well as the defense minister of Israel, Yoav Gallant. And here we have a video of Benjamin Netanyahu threatening us with a good time. So let's go ahead and listen to this real quick.
He's creating a false symmetry between the democratically elected leaders of Israel and the terrorist chieftains. That's like saying after 9/11, well, I'm issuing arrest warrants for George Bush, but also for bin Laden. Or after in World War II, well, I'm issuing arrest warrants for FDR, but also for Hitler. It's a hit job. It's not serious. He's out to defame Israel, and he's also pouring gasoline on the fires of anti-Semitism that are spreading around the world, because he is attacking the one and only Jewish state and trying to handcuff us, preventing us from exercising responsibly through the laws of war as we obey them and we are subordinate to them. He's saying we're not. He's creating false symmetry, false facts, and he's doing a grave injustice to the international court. He's creating.
Okay, so there were like three different, standard, Israel talking points that he threw in there. Of course, he appeals to anti-Semitism and says, oh, the ICC isn't operating within the boundaries of international law and what they're supposed to be doing as this international organization. They're actually just targeting us because we are the only Jewish state in the world. I mean, really, we're playing this game? Is that why they also went after Hamas leaders and issued, applications for arrest warrants for Sinwar and Hania? Because they're rabid anti-Semites? I mean, were they just confused and they thought these Hamas leaders were Jewish and they accidentally filed those warrants for them? I mean, what are we doing here? It's just completely absurd. The second standard talking point that he goes to there is that, of course, we are the good guys. We are, fighting a war of good versus evil. And, of course, we would never violate international law. How dare you even insinuate that? We are always operating within the bounds of, whatever international law says that we should do in times of war. That, obviously, at face value, complete farcical, right? Now, the third thing that he says is again, kind of threatening us with a good time. He's saying going after himself, as well as Yoav Gallant, would be like going after George W. Bush for war crimes, as well as Osama bin Laden? I'm sorry, are we talking about the same George W. Bush? The same George W. Bush that launched a totally illegal war based on complete lies? That George W. Bush? The George W. Bush that has the blood of hundreds of thousands of people on his hands? That George W. Bush? Yeah, if anybody should be behind, jail cell bars right now, it would be him. I mean, you would genuinely struggle to find an American alive right now who has more blood on their hands of innocent civilians than George fucking Bush. What are we talking about here? He should have been sent to The Hague. That's not even in question for anybody who has reasonable, standards that they apply, regardless of whether or not it's an allied country, it's your own country, or it's an enemy country, or geopolitical adversary, or whatever the case may be. Of course, he's a war criminal. Of course, he deserves to be tried at The Hague. So, yeah, I'll take that deal. We're going to take Benjamin Netanyahu, take the Hamas leaders as well. That's fine. And we'll take George W. Bush to The Hague as well. I'm down to go forward with that deal. Now, we move on because there's a lot of other things that I wanted to touch on here real quick. So, yesterday, we get this tweet from the Israeli foreign minister, okay? And he says, this evening, I met with AIPAC leaders, Michael Tuchin and Howard Kor. The state of Israel owes them so much for their long-standing support. I asked them to work with the administration and Congress to take dramatic steps against the decision by the prosecutor of the ICC. So, I mean, compare this to previous headlines that we've gotten, like here from the New York Times. Remember when Ilhan Omar was being called a raging anti-Semite because she said it's all about the Benjamins, and she was referring to the Israel lobby, essentially bribing our politicians legally. And this is how the New York Times covered it at the time. AIPAC does not lobby on behalf of Israel. Really? They do not lobby on behalf of Israel. It is sensitive about being characterized as an agent of a foreign power, as Miss Omar suggested it was during her talk in Washington last week. If you're sensitive in terms of being labeled as acting on behalf of a foreign power, maybe don't have meetings with the leaders of foreign powers and then do their bidding. I mean, that's maybe a way to sort of like nip those allegations in the bud, I mean, what are we doing? What are we doing? Is anybody seriously convinced that AIPAC is not operating on behalf of the Israeli government? Of course they are. That's the entire reason for their existence. And they, specifically AIPAC, they do not have to register as a foreign lobbying organization, right? Which is totally ridiculous. It's insane that this is legal. This is foreign bribery of our political system. AIPAC is like the #1 donor in the United States of America in many of these elections. I mean, we're talking about tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars that have been dumped into American elections throughout the years. And this is just somehow normalized, that the Israeli foreign minister can just publicly tweet this out. I just had a meeting with AIPAC, and I'm telling them to try to, lobby the politicians who they are buying off to push back against the International Criminal Court bringing arrest warrants for war criminals. That's where we're at right now. And of course, our Congress, dutifully obliged by these demands from AIPAC and from the Israeli foreign minister. So here we have Antony Blinken says that he is happy to work with Congress on an appropriate response to the ICC prosecutor issuing warrants to Israeli leaders who have led the killing of 35,000 plus people and the displacement of 2 million while killing more hostages than they've saved. And then we also had, minutes later, here from Prem, Senators Lindsey Graham, as well as Cardin, Blumenthal, Shaheen, Fetterman, of course, Risch, Britt, Thune, declare that they will work in a bipartisan manner to strenuously object to the ICC's actions against our ally Israel and to take appropriate steps to help Israel and protect Americans from ICC action. So they're doing exactly what AIPAC wants them to do. They're doing exactly what the Israeli government wants them to do. I mean, all of this is extremely predictable, but again, simultaneously insane. I know that for people who are watching my videos, this isn't shocking, this isn't surprising, but it should be. We can't allow this kind of shit to be normalized. We have U.S. politicians just openly threatening to starve the world, to, go after the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice for doing what? For attempting to hold one of our allies accountable for brazen war crimes that we have all seen in 4K for the last 6-7 months straight. That's what we're doing. Now we also have this input here from Bruno, which I think is also kind of important, because what Antony Blinken is saying there, and what the U.S. government is planning on doing by trying to sabotage the ICC, going after Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, is in and of itself a crime under the ICC statute. So, I mean, here's the actual offenses. You can look here at the Article 70, Offenses Against the Administration of Justice. And as he points out here, the U.S. is currently violating Article D, impeding, intimidating, or corruptly influencing an official of the court for the purpose of forcing or persuading the official not to perform or to perform improperly his or her duties, as well as Article C, or E, which says retaliating against an official of the court on account of duties performed by that or another official. So we're actually violating the ICC standards by trying to go after the ICC. I mean, it's just amazing, guys. Now, obviously, the U.S. doesn't recognize the International Criminal Court. We're not signatories to the International Criminal Court, or really, I should say, we don't recognize the ICC if they're going after us or one of our allies. We do recognize them when they're going after some of our geopolitical adversaries, like when Joe Biden praised the ICC going after Vladimir Putin, for example. So, I mean, all of this hypocrisy is on such a glaring display right now, right? Now, thankfully, we did have some people who were showing up to these congressional testimonies here and protesting and giving a little bit of hell to guys like Antony Blinken. So let's watch this short little interaction here.
Russia was 6 years old when Israelis killed her. His Russia was 6 years old. Blinken, you will be remembered as the butcher of Gaza. You will be remembered for murdering innocent Palestinians.
Yeah, I mean, none of that was unfair. I mean, this is how every single waking moment of his life, of Biden's life, of the rest of the U.S. politicians who have been complicit in this, as well as Israeli politicians, this is what their life should be, right? We should never let them live this down, forget this, allow them to just peacefully go about their days with no interruptions whatsoever, as they're just actively complicit in an ongoing genocide. I mean, what is there to disagree about what he just said, bringing up Hind Rajab, a 6-year-old child who was brutally murdered in cold blood by the IDF, and then they also murdered the 2 ambulance workers who went to try and save her after the fact. So, I mean, yeah, this should be happening every single day. That Joe Biden should not be able to go out in public without that kind of thing happening to him. Now, we also had this that I've seen getting overlooked for some reason, but this is from Karim Khan, the prosecutor who brought the warrants against Yoav Gallant and Benjamin Netanyahu. And he said in this CNN interview that he was doing recently that when he received threats not to go after Israel, he's revealed that, quote, a senior leader, he hasn't revealed who the leader is, but presumably it's an Israeli leader or a U.S. leader, told him that the International Criminal Court, quote, is built for Africa and for thugs like Putin, and not for the West and its allies. Built for Africa and for thugs like Putin. So, in other words, he's confirming exactly what I was just saying, that to the United States, there is no such thing as international law. If you're the US, or if you're one of our allies, if you're one of our geopolitical adversaries, right, or you're a country that we want to, meddle with or exploit or whatever the case may be, then, yeah, you bet your ass that international law exists, and we will try to use all of the levers that we have at our disposal to make it bear down on you. So, I mean, this is just confirming the complete double standard and what the US and our allies really view these international institutions as. They are our weapons to be used against our geopolitical adversaries. They are not, principled or neutral arbiters of international law or justice, right? They should be. That's how it should be in practice, but it's not, because we're not willing to allow it to be, right? Now, we also have this here, pretty much confirming exactly what Karim Khan just shared there. In a question on democracy, Senator Cory Booker quips about, quote, countries like China and Russia that do not share the world's order's rules, clearly. And then minutes later, Booker joined others in applauding Antony Blinken for calling the International Criminal Court actions wrong-headed. I mean, have you ever seen such a perfect side-by-side split like this, right? Oh, it's China and Russia that aren't following the global world order and international law. And then like 2 seconds later, you are participating in attacking the International Criminal Court for trying to actually act on violations of international law against one of your allies. I mean, it's just, it's so brazen. It is so brazen. And I'll finish off with this here. Here from Michael Tracy. So this is apparently trying to be snuck into a new bill by Representative Guy Reschenthaler, I guess is how you say his name, a Republican from Pennsylvania, and Representative Max Miller from Ohio. They introduced a bill that would extend the same taxpayer benefits to Americans serving in the IDF as if they were serving in the U.S. military. So we have thousands of Americans who have chosen to go over to Israel to fight in the IDF, okay, to participate in this genocide. They've willingly chosen to do this. And not only are we choosing to not potentially prosecute them for participating in a genocide, but we are now, if this bill gets passed, going to be providing them benefits as if they are U.S. soldiers, okay? So in other words, we are directly incentivizing American soldiers to go and fight for a different country's military. Not even in a war, but in a genocide. This is where we're at, guys. So I'm going to have a couple more Israel things for you guys later today, but I've been genuinely overwhelmed over the especially last couple of weeks. I mean, obviously over the last 6-7 months, but the last couple of weeks, everything has just spiraled into utter insanity, utter madness. The censorship, the endless arms shipments, the complete gaslighting on every single issue. It's just insane at this point. It's genuinely hard to wrap your mind around what this country is exposing itself to be.
Politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying